Hello, welcome to Talking Europe on France 24 with you this week from the European Parliament in Strasbourg. Now, it's been a very hectic week for Europe with turmoil in the UK over Brexit reaching new heights or depths, depending on how you see things. There are also now just 10 weeks to go before European Parliament elections that some say could markedly change the face of this bloc if predictions come true that voters are set to give their support to the more populist end of the political spectrum. Joining me to discuss events in the EU with Brexit and in France, a senior French MEP who's a former member of the French intelligence services, chairman currently of the European Parliament's subcommittee on security and defence as well, Arnaud Danjean. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you.
I ought to say as well for our viewers that you're a member of the centre-right party of the former President Nicolas Sarkozy, now called Les Républicains. So just first then, a question about the dominant Europe story of the week, Brexit, which is going rather chaotically. As we record this, it looks like the UK is going to be asking for an extension. Should the EU allow this to go on any longer?
Well, the real question is what for? I mean, we've been discussing that for more than 2 years now. No alternative solution have come to the table by the British parties. We have British MPs voting no over and over again, but making no real proposals. So what for? If we continue like this, if we give more time, there should be something on the table to discuss, which is not the case. So I would rather be negative on that and say, well, enough is enough. You had enough time to discuss. You had enough time to make proposals. It has not come. We have been waiting. We were ready for that. Europe was ready for that and has shown this readiness, contrary to some comments. But now it's time to decide. And
would you accept, in that case, the UK leaving on a no-deal basis, by design or by accident?
I fear we might come to this solution. Unfortunately, this is almost all due to the irresponsible behavior of those who have promoted and advocated for Brexit at the first place, and these people never wanted to come to their responsibilities. They said to the people, vote for Brexit, everything's going to be better, and now we're coming to the Brexit, but they have never taken their responsibilities. So that's a problem.
Says that she's fulfilling the democratic wish of the people who voted by majority to leave the EU.
We are also at the European level fulfilling the wish of the sovereign wish of the British people. They voted for the Brexit. So we implement the Brexit, but it has to be implemented. That's a problem. It's not just a vote and then you leave. We have to implement. UK is withdrawing from, I think, more than 700 treaties and international agreements, not only trade treaties and international agreements, but very technical one. It has to be implemented. It has to be orderly implemented, and that's this reality that the Brexiters don't really want to see face to face, I would say.
We're just talking about implications of Brexit as a former member of the French intelligence services. If the UK does eventually leave the EU, should there still be intelligence sharing on the same level between the UK and the EU? Can that happen?
Yes, I do believe that it's not very concerning. First, because the cooperation in terms of intelligence is based on a state level and cooperation, and not communitarized prerogative of the European Union. So France and Britain do cooperate intensively, and it will continue. And I don't see any change in that. We do not have at the EU level an intelligence policy, an integrated one. So it's a state cooperation and it will continue. So I'm not overwhelmingly concerned by this.
All right, well, I'd like to move on to a security worry that worries many European states, the potential return home of hundreds of Europeans who've gone to Syria to fight alongside the Islamic State group. Now, there's been a particularly controversial case I know you're aware of in the UK, Shamima Begum. She's 19 now. She was 15 when she went to Syria to marry a jihadist. Now in a refugee camp, and the British Interior Minister has stripped her of her UK nationality on the grounds that she is eligible to apply for Bangladeshi citizenship. She's just lost her third baby. We're going to run a report now about Shamima Begum, and we'll come back to this topic afterwards. This is from Naomi Lloyd.
Shamima Begum knew he wasn't safe, and on Friday it was confirmed that her baby Jarrah had died of pneumonia. Even members of the Conservative Party are critical of a decision that many say has resulted in a child's death.
We have to take responsibility for our citizens, and my view is that she should be back in Britain and that she should be processed in Britain. And had her child lived, we would certainly have had a duty, since the child was clearly a British citizen, to look after the child. Very sadly, the child has now died.
In 2015, Begum was groomed and convinced to leave for Syria with two school friends from the Bethnal Green Academy. She was 15 years old when she married a Dutch Islamic State fighter. After fleeing Islamic State territory, she said last month she wanted to raise her baby in Britain, but her lack of remorse in interviews turned public opinion against her. She was stripped of her citizenship, a move decried by human rights lawyers and NGOs. Many pointed out that it was a measure that would not be possible against white Britons. But for the government, it's not a question of racism, but of safety.
Well, I think it's absolutely tragic that a baby has died. And of course, I understand this is a really terrible problem. But on the other hand, the job of the Home Secretary is to protect all people in the United Kingdom. He will have had advice on what was the right thing to do, and I totally support his decision.
Aged just 19 and married since the age of 15, Shamima Begum has given birth 3 times. All 3 of her children have died from illness and malnutrition.
Shamima Begum's family is fighting the decision by the British government to take away her citizenship. Is that the correct decision? Does she pose a threat to the UK? Should her rights be protected?
It's difficult for me to comment something which is connected to the legal system of Britain. I mean, this is a law, and I wish we could have the same, I would say, in France. I mean, I hardly have any compassion for those who have joined these jihadist groups. They knew what they were doing, they knew what it was about, and they have been living there for many years. They could have witnessed what it was about, and these people were clearly enemies of our societies. So I would be rather strict on that.
What should happen to the people who are in those refugee camps in Syria? Our reporters from France 24 have been to one of the camps and they've met French citizens who are in those camps. Not sure if they'll ever be returning home. Should the French government be bringing them home to face justice here?
I think most of the people who are actually detained in Iraq, in Syria, by the Kurds, should be tried there and should face justice where they committed crimes. So most of them on the spot.
Although Syria isn't a functioning state
well,
at this point.
Iraq is, to some extent. So I think we have agreement with Iraq. That's what is being processed now. So I would rather leave them there. Case by case, we could consider having some of them facing justice in France if they are clearly connected to attacks that have been happening in France against French citizens. There could be an opportunity for the French judicial system to trial them and for the families of the victim to get justice in France. But for most of the cases, I think it would be rather dangerous to bring them back.
Would you be in favour of stripping people of their nationality if they had another citizenship or the possibility of one?
Yes, if they have another citizenship, yes, definitely. And if they have a dual citizenship, in that case, I don't see why France should take them back.
Let's move on to the upcoming European elections. Your party, Les Républicains, once in power under Nicolas Sarkozy, but with the rise of Emmanuel Macron, it is experiencing more difficult times. It won 20 seats in the European Parliament last time, projected to go down to perhaps 11 in May. That would put your party third after Emmanuel Macron's La République En Marche and the far-right Rassemblement National. Why is your party struggling to appear as the real opposition party?
Well, as you have mentioned, we faced many difficulties internally, but also due to the turmoil in the French politics during the last presidential elections 2 years ago, and it was difficult for us to recover. We had to design a new party, a new leadership. We have to offer, I would say, new program also, and it was difficult for us to find space between this very polarized French political scene between Macron and Le Pen. And to be clear, it's a deliberate strategy from both of them. Macron and Le Pen are playing
To take your voters.
Are playing to polarize as much as they can the political scene in France, and we are struggling to explain to the people it's not good or bad, it's not black or white. We are in a liberal democracy. You should have the choice. Pluralism is a virtue of the system, and you should not be hostage of this polarized offer, which is Macron on the one hand, who wants to present himself as the only pro-European guy in France, and Le Pen, who is trying to gather the whole anti-system people. There are other ways, and Les Républicains is something more, I would say, realistic in that regard. We are pro-European, but we are not against the sovereignty of the nation states.
Well, your party is seen as having moved politically much more towards the right, with much more harsh rhetoric on topics where the far right are strong, security, immigration. This, as voters were drifting towards the far right. It's
not because of getting to the far right. It's just because it's a claim of the people. It's just because it's the reality in the one.
But if your party is now losing votes, was that a mistake to take that change?
I'm not sure we are losing vote right now. We have been defeated, and we have been defeated because we have also neglected claim by the people. They wanted us to talk more about security. They wanted us to face the real migration issues. These are issues we cannot neglect. We cannot hide, and we have to take that into account. It's not tactical. It's also the claim of the people on the ground. And if we don't want to be disconnected from the people and come to what has happened in Britain, for example, with the Brexit, we have to take that into consideration. It does not mean that we have to answer with the same answers as the far right does, but we have to offer something. We have to offer an answer because it's a kind of existential claim in our societies now. What are you doing to protect us? It's something we have to take into account.
Now, about your group in the European Parliament, it's the European People's Party, or EPP, the biggest group in the Parliament. Now, you've got a big decision to make in the coming days, a vote on March the 20th on whether the EPP should expel the Fidesz party of the Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban. Which way will you be voting? Should he stay or go?
I would speak on my behalf, only personally. I would not exclude Orban from my party right now. I would not make the choice now. I think it's a discussion, it's a very serious matter. We should discuss it in a very thorough way and not in an electoral period. So I don't believe the time is appropriate. The timing is not good. And I think also that if we have to make a decision on Orban, we have to take into account a broader picture. Not only the last provocation that was made with Billboard, with Juncker and Soros. I think it deserves a deeper discussion. So I don't think the timing is appropriate for that.
If you vote in favour of Viktor Orban's Fidesz party staying in the EPP, isn't that condoning this behaviour, perhaps encouraging him? Because there have been documented cases, degradations of rule of law, media, academic freedom, the open attacks you mentioned on Jean-Claude Juncker, the European Commission. Can that be condoned? Is that what you're doing?
I think, I mean, we have a debate with Orban for many years now. It's not a new phenomenon.
And he hasn't changed course.
If we are to blame Orban for something, it could be for some trends in this illiberal democracy and the rule of law in Hungary. Then we have to consider it very seriously.
And do you believe that you should be bringing him back into line?
But yes, and on this we already had this debate. It came many times in front of our groups. We had the vote in the parliament in September last year. So it's something which is going on. And there are discussions and negotiations even with the commissions to see if there are threats in Hungary against the rule of law. So this is a very serious matter on which we should be very strict. What I don't accept is that we mix that together with the consideration on the migration policy. Because on migration policy, I do not say that I share fully Orban's view, but I do respect the fact that each country has the right to define and to design his own migration policy. And I don't want to blame Orban for the migration policy he has chosen. And on this, I wouldn't like the EPP to take a decision based on this. I would like the EPP to consider objectively what is wrong and what could be blamed, and not to make this kind of general trial of Orban. And once again, the timing is really not appropriate.
Are you talking about waiting till after the European elections? And what kind of action do you think would be appropriate at that point, in terms of, as I said, degradations of rule of law,
I think it has to be,
freedom, civil liberties?
I think it has to be considered very, very seriously. It has to be documented very well. You know that we had a vote on this. The final result of the vote was starting this Article 7 process. The Article 7 process, contrary to what is said all over the place, it's not a sanction, automatic sanction against Hungary. Hungary right now is not under sanction. I would like to wait for the final result of these discussions and also a very well documented report to see if sanctions have to be taken or not. At that stage, I don't believe it is the case.
All right, unfortunately, that's all we've got time for. Thank you very much, Arnaud Danjean, for being our guest on Talking Europe. Thanks to you as well for watching. See you shortly for more European news on France 24.
The Mongolian steppe, long the home of nomads, the vast Mongolian grassland is emptying of its people. Climate change has decimated their herds. Families are left only with the country's capital as a promise of refuge. Forced to abandon generations of tradition, the nomads now face the challenges of pollution, unemployment, and the vagaries of uncertain healthcare.
Reporters presented by Mark Owen on France 24 and France24.com.